The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam. Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. After a couple of weeks of trying to get back to this series, we're getting back to this series. It will not be right now, but it will be later in the episode. But in the meantime, Media Day was today, Mike. We were not there, nor did we have...
We're not allowed, I don't think.
We were not allowed. We
never tried.
We never tried. We probably never will be allowed. That's okay. We don't need to be there. Because
when Sarver's gone,
who knows?
I mean, maybe we should go next year.
Never say never.
John Najafi will send us a personal invite.
There could be
next season.
There could be a produced segment at Media Day 1 year from the Timeline podcast. That would be kind of fun. Regardless,
it'd be hilarious.
There are great reporters who were there instead, who are much better than us at delivering the types of content that reporters deliver. And it's more so before we get into the nuts and bolts of everything that happened there. It's just kind of nice that Media Day, I think, to the diehard basketball fan is really the signal that the season is here. For the casual, you're not really paying attention at all, maybe to the NBA in the offseason, except for a couple big free agent signings, maybe, or trades. Then you're not really paying attention to the season until like Christmas. That's how it works for a lot of the American public. But to the diehard basketball fan, and specifically probably the type of basketball fan that listens to this podcast on September 26th, Media Day is... It's a fun day. It's a fun day. It's the start of everything, and it means that basketball's here, we're locked in, we're ready to go.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'll say, though, just on Media Day, it is funny how everything seems like a big deal on Media Day.
100%.
And then you just forget everything.
That's a really good point in that. Yeah. And I wanted to make that point specifically. Can you tell me one thing that happened on Media Day of last year?
No. Mm-mm. There's some pictures that you see,
pictures,
the photos those are the only things that last the whole season.
I think
there was something that happened this year that'll be memorable throughout the season.
Well,
hopefully,
and that's
as that was weird and not that was a sign.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. It really is a jumping off point, I think, for narratives. But sometimes it's also important to remember that those can be just narratives, right? And
other thing I want to say about Media Day is usually it's fun and funny, and they're laughing and smiling. And Robert Sarver, of course, took that from us this year, I think, because, first of all, give a shout out to the reporters. I think they're just this is Media Day. If it does anything, it's a reminder how lucky Suns fans are, because, Dwayne, who I think asks really great questions, Kellen and Gerald in particular, I think all three of those guys do such an amazing job, and really anything that we need to be asked or that they need to be asked every year just gets asked. So shout out to them. But they had a responsibility to ask every single player about Robert Sarver, at least the returning players. I'm not sure if they asked Jock Landale about Robert Sarver, but the returning players, they had a responsibility to ask him. And I think every single one of those players understood the seriousness of talking about Robert Sarver this year. And I think that really showed throughout Media Day. So for Suns fans and for Suns players, there really wasn't a lot that was fun about this Media Day in the way that it is supposed to be. And I think that probably made for an awkward experience for the players and the media that was involved.
For sure. I mean, a lot of it was Sarver related. A lot of it also honestly felt like remnants of Game 7 and the meltdown and everything. So I think
every player was asked about that too.
I mean, yeah, the vibes were not... We'll get into it more in a bit, right? But the vibes were weird, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's kind of tough. That's
we're going to talk through some of that, but let's talk about Jay Crowder since we haven't talked about him yet.
Most important news of the week, for sure.
He was missing from Media Day, and he was missing because, as Shams Charania reported, the Suns basically said, you don't have to come. We're trying to trade you. And it sounds like from subsequent reporting that Jay Crowder's agency, the people representing Jay Crowder, are also involved in looking for a trade for Jay Crowder. So the Suns are planning on trading Jay Crowder. As far as when, that probably depends on what teams are willing to give up. I don't think James Jones wants to be fleeced just because someone like Jay Crowder is asking for a trade or insisting it and making trade hype videos on Instagram. But
wait, okay, stop. Can we talk about that? Because I think that's a niche reference that you just made that I think most people, even if they know the story that Jay Crowder requested a trade, they don't necessarily know that. Can you explain what that was? Yeah. That was amazing.
Okay, so the report that Shams Charania reported on Jay Crowder posts about an hour later. Like, really, I mean, like, this was prepared before that. Jay Crowder was ready. Jay Crowder on his Instagram posts a video essentially hyping up the concept of him being available for a trade, almost as if it was like Kevin Durant's free agency or something. Like, it was so produced
it reminded
and ready.
It reminded me, and like these videos still exist on the internet today, but it especially reminded me of there was a certain era in the early YouTube era, maybe, or the mid YouTube era,
right.
like 2008 to like 2013 of like the corny inspirational music in the background and like these, but the point is, those types of videos would never be about Jay Crowder. It would be like you'd click on a video that has like 6 million views on YouTube with like, I don't know, like some remix of like Time by Hans Zimmer in the background. And it's about Kobe Bryant, right?
Right.
It's not about Jay Crowder. So the fact, first of all, it's also really funny to imagine that it was Jay himself who edited this.
Yeah.
It definitely,
I mean, at least
was not.
He has a team, right? He has a team.
He 100%.
Do you think Jay Crowder knows how to blur out a Suns logo on a video? Absolutely not. No. He has somebody else to do that.
He hired someone to do it. But anyway.
Can I just ask you from this perspective?
Sure.
How do you feel about players posting highlights of themselves?
Why shouldn't they? I've never had an issue with that. Have you?
Would you do it? I don't know if I would do it.
I don't think I...
Like,
I don't know, man. It depends on the
If I was Jay Crowder, maybe I'd do it. If I was Devin Booker, I don't think
I'm kind of surprised.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I'm kind of surprised. Yeah. You tend to hype yourself, like, go to bat for yourself. Tends to be like your philosophy in life, I think. Like, if you're not going to stand up for yourself, no one else is going to do it for you, right? I think that's
but like,
a good
we're
mindset
nobodies.
to have. I'm not talking about us specifically. You asked me a hypothetical of if I would post my own highlights. I think I would. Okay. But let's draw a line. There's a difference between posting your highlights and posting this pre-produced, ridiculous video of like Jay Crowder is suddenly the decision part 2, which he is not. That is not what this is.
I said it on Twitter, but if you showed somebody that video that's never watched the NBA, they'd be like, wow, Jay Crowder must be the best player in the NBA. It's crazy that the Suns would even consider trading him. And you know what? I loved it. I'm not going to lie. I was watching it going, this is exactly why you like Jay Crowder.
I mean,
and look, he's asking for a trade off the Suns, who are a very good team. Now, we don't have to go on a rant about it. Sam and I did mostly Sam
days ago.
Sam ranted about it on our Patreon podcast. I'm sorry, not everyone has access to that, but like there was some words on that said on that podcast about how Jay Crowder can't hold you hostage because he's Jay Crowder.
He's Jay Crowder. It's not going to do the whole rant again, but yeah, it's a ridiculous proposition when even Kevin Durant doesn't have that sway. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. But I mean, having said all that, I just was like, you know what? It's just so funny to watch that video and think about Jay Crowder making that. It's just so funny, and I like Jay Crowder. And I think, the onus is, at this point, the onus is on James Jones to find a way to spin that into the Suns getting something of value from Jay Crowder, who is a good player and could be on good teams. It's been mentioned some teams that are involved in potentially trading for him. Memphis, Boston, I think were some of the teams mentioned so far. Philadelphia,
Dallas.
Miami, Dallas.
You'll notice every former Jay Crowder team seems to be interested in him again, pretty much.
Right.
Which I thought was very telling. I mean, I think...
So he'll be back, is what you're saying?
Huh?
He'll be back to the Suns at some point.
I mean, maybe. Never.
40-year-old Jay Crowder signing a 3-year contract like PJ Tucker.
Never say never. We've seen disgruntled players come and go before. It's more so just the fact that I think, look, I'm not going to redo the whole rant. Like, I think Jay has handled this very unprofessionally, and I'm disappointed in a lot of ways in the way this is ending. That being said, if we're just talking about his basketball value, I think just the fact that all of these teams that used to have him and let him go are now interested in reacquiring him, I think it says something about Jay's skill set, that like all of these maybe playoff wannabes, some of them real contenders on the other end of the spectrum, but the fact that they all have a shared interest in Jay Crowder, he has a real NBA skill set, and he's definitely going to be a loss for the Suns. How much of a loss is yet to be seen, but it's just unfortunate that previously we were talking about how can we upgrade from Jay Crowder. Obviously, we started with the Kevin Durant discussion, but even then, we moved on to Bojan Bogdanovic. I think we have some pretty good intel about Harrison Barnes, right? But we've kind of moved on from those discussions now to like, you know, I don't know, dude, Duncan Robinson,
Dylan Brooks,
Matisse Thybulle,
maybe Xavier Tillman, and Brandon Clark,
like names that I think are just not particularly interesting when you talk about the kind of value that's out there 2 weeks before the season starts when you're making a trade.
Yeah, and that's why I think maybe it could take a little longer than people anticipate. I don't know. I don't know if Jay Crowder is going to show up at training camp if it's not done by then. I don't know if the Suns are willing to hold him out for a month while contenders kind of bid against each other for somebody like Jay Crowder, since he makes that big of a difference. I think maybe they would.
Let me just say there, I think they absolutely should. I would absolutely endorse doing that because, I think you got to get the best.
Ben Simmons him. Yeah.
I mean, let's just be honest.
Yeah.
I haven't blamed him for it at this point, but you know, because I understand the actual what went into chasing Kevin Durant for 2 months. It was unreasonable to expect the Suns to lose on the Kevin Durant sweepstakes and then suddenly turn around.
To try.
Yeah, they had to try. And they couldn't just suddenly turn around and have the perfect backup plan like ready to go, executed within a week, right? That being said, James Jones trotted out there today at Media Day and said that he believes the Suns were a better team this year.
He had to.
And of course he had to.
know?
Of course he had to. But there's not a person. I challenge you to find me a person in that room who actually believed the words that he was saying.
Yeah.
Because
at least Sarver will be there.
It's just not true. And when you add in now the prospect of losing Jay Crowder, they need to get value out of this guy. And if that means holding him out of the rotation until December 15th, when more players will be available, newly signed players will be eligible to be traded at that point, so be it. I don't care if it impacts the regular season record for 20 or 25 games. Do whatever it takes. He's a role player at the end of the day. Nice guy. It's a business. Like, you know, he gets to go and make his money or whatever. But if you got to hold him out of the rotation, I don't give a shit. You absolutely do that.
Now that we've talked about him, he's going to get traded as soon as we
possibly
post this episode. Let's talk about Media Day. Everyone was asked about Sarver. Let's just quickly get our Sarver portion of this out of the way. I think it sucks that any of the players even had to be asked about him. I thought the majority of the players handled it well. I think Devin Booker took some rightful criticism for saying that's not the Sarver I knew multiple times. I will say in Devin Booker's defense, I kind of believe him. I think Sarver probably is like treats people like Devin Booker really well and other people really badly. So, you know, in some sense, Devin Booker was shielded from it. And I also think that there was some level of Devin Booker protecting himself by saying, like, I never saw that, which is whatever. I think it kind of sucks, but like, I wish they didn't have to talk about it at all. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, not particularly. I wasn't surprised to see the criticism levied towards Booker there. And again, I understand, but also on the, like, I don't know, what did we expect him to say?
I just don't care that much. I don't know.
I mostly want Booker to tell the truth. And if his experience is truthful, that Sarver never treated him in that way, of course I want him to show sympathy or empathy towards...
And to be fair, he acknowledged the people that were affected by his actions as well.
But so that's my point, is as long as you acknowledge the people who are affected, if you then tell the truth to say, hey, he never victimized me personally, I don't necessarily...
I've never seen him do it.
I don't necessarily see the big deal. Also, there's another aspect to this, which we kind of just got to be honest, like, Booker is not the activist type. At least not at this point in his career. He never has been. And I don't know.
He doesn't seem to have the desire to do that.
I think everyone is within their own rights to feel however they want to feel about that. Not every player needs to be an activist. On the other hand, I think you're rightful for calling out guys when you really believe that they should be speaking up about an issue that they're choosing to remain silent on. In Booker's case, I just don't think we've seen the evidence at his point in his career that he's particularly interested in that side of things, not to the extent of a guy like Chris Paul. Like with Chris Paul, we expected a statement almost immediately. I don't think Chris put out...
former Players Union president. Like Devin Booker will never be the Players Union president,
I don't think Chris put out the perfect statement either, for the record, but he put out a statement, and then, I wasn't necessarily expecting anything from Book. It's just kind of the way it is. I don't really know what else to say about it.
The biggest story, I think, from Media Day, unfortunately, was a very weird press conference from DeAndre where he just seemed unhappy. And, of course, that's been spun into DeAndre Ayton doesn't look very happy to be here for the Suns right now. But it was weird. I watched the whole thing live as it happened, and I was like, this is weird. I don't know how else to put it. He doesn't seem happy. Short answers, very serious. He's usually a fun guy, and it's just not the normal DeAndre Ayton from Media Day. Now, let me just preface all of that with saying this. Pointing out that it was weird is a fact. It was weird.
Well.
Extrapolating
is that a
anything
fact?
Beyond that,
that still sounds like an opinion to me.
I mean, every single person that has known DeAndre Ayton that was there said the same thing.
It was unusual.
It was weird.
I guess that's a synonym for weird.
Extrapolating anything beyond that. Now, there's two sides of that. Saying, one, that he's going to somehow play badly and that, whatever, because of this one thing that happened at Media Day. That's also weird, a thing to do. Beyond that, saying, wow, DeAndre Ayton's mad. He's going to be incredible this year because now he's mad. Saying that it's a good thing too. That's also weird. Both of those things are weird. But it was an odd press conference where he did not seem to be happy. It could have been as simple as this is how he reacted to having to be serious when talking about Robert Sarver and the situation that came with Robert Sarver. He just he didn't want to be playful in this moment. Or it could have just been, honestly, it could be that he was unhappy with being back with the Suns because the contract situation was weird and he didn't like being forced to be put in the position to answer questions about it. Mm-hmm. It could be that. I'm not saying that it is or it isn't. But anything beyond that, I will just say that it was weird. It was something that I've never seen from DeAndre Ayton before in the situation that he was put in. It was a moment where, although I will say, to give him credit, I think he handled the Robert Sarver questions gracefully and incredibly well. But beyond that, I just think, he didn't seem happy, and I've never seen him like that.
I think most body language experts would probably agree with your initial assessment that it was unusual. And look, the most important thing there is that the reporters see these guys all the time, and so if they're saying it's unusual, I'm inclined to believe them. I think
Dwayne even said, that's it? When he asked him about how he felt about his contract.
So I think the important thing to stress or reemphasize here about Media Day is, on the one hand, we're all excited because Media Day is kicking off the season for us. On the other hand, what Media Day means, that it's the beginning of the season, is that all of us, whether you're feeling optimistic at this particular point in time about the Suns or pessimistic or somewhere in between, if you're the type of person who is a basketball diehard, if you're like me, you've been thinking about it. You've been stewing on your personal opinions about the Phoenix Suns and about basketball for 3 months now, without any new information really to go on other than speculation here or there. No games to be played. You've just been stewing. You've been building up these preconceptions in your head about when Media Day comes or when the season comes, exactly what you want these guys to say, how you want them to act. And so I think that the difficult thing about Media Day is it's important sometimes to recognize those impulses and recognize those preconceptions and not jump down a guy's throat based on 2 or 3 words taken out of context. That being said, I do agree that this was not 2 or 3 words. This was kind of all of Ayton's answers were delivered in this same tone. So I do think there is something to look at there and just, not necessarily say it's going to reflect his play, at least not yet, but say, yes, that is unusual. And I wonder what that means. There's a natural curiosity aspect that I think makes a lot of sense.
There's 2 things that can happen from here. It's never mentioned again, and we all forget about this once he starts playing on
Absolutely.
Court. The other thing is, if his effort is weird, things are weird, vibes are off, we talk about it every day for the rest of the season.
Oh,
Those are the two things that can happen, and I hope it's the first one. I think personally, I think there are no reasons to believe that DeAndre Ayton would be anything less than professional as a player, and because that's how he's been.
And
there's one moment, of course, in Game 7 that people will want to bring up that it's just like that was a disaster, whatever. Who cares?
Let's note also the other parts that came out of Media Day, the other Ayton-related tidbits. Like Monty Williams was talking him up. He said that people, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but that people essentially aren't ready to or will be surprised by the amount of work that he's put in. So
he looks in shape too.
I don't know. Hashtag muscle watch. I don't know.
Hashtag muscle watch.
Actually, if there's any hashtag muscle watch guy, I don't know if you noticed this too, but Mikal Bridges looks...
Cameron Johnson.
Yeah, I mean...
He wears sleeves, though. Covers them up.
Mikal Bridges, his entire interview, I was just looking at his arms and shoulders, to be honest, because I was like, man...
Myron.
Like, he looks like he's put in some work in the gym and added to that frame. Let me address one thing about the Ayton thing.
Okay.
Here.
The Ayton thing.
Sorry, about this story. So, in general, I think we're on the same page. We're not going crazy here. We're not...
No, it'd be weird to like go crazy from literally anything that happens at Media Day. Literally anything.
But I think it's important to point that out because there is this weird. Do I even want to address this? There is this one particular faction, or this one like viewpoint that I see parroted a lot, which is that the reason that Ayton embraced this tone is because like usually he's his goofy self or whatever, and it's like people are gonna criticize him no matter what he does. The media is gonna like be out to get him no matter what he does. So this is his reaction to that, is he's playing the stoic angle as a direct reaction to like the media treating him unfairly, I guess, is I think if I'm properly representing the viewpoint of these people. But what I don't understand about that, and as someone who's honestly tried to understand this, I don't understand where this idea is permeating from, that DeAndre Ayton specifically was unfairly persecuted by Suns media or Suns fans or anyone else in the aftermath of Game 7. The experience that I had as someone who interacts with a lot of Suns fans and talks about the Suns every week was that pretty much everyone recognized Game 7 for the disaster that it was. I think Ayton got a little bit of flack for literally
because he was part of it,
for literally leaving the game and then not coming back in. However,
just not playing well the last two games.
But we all recognized the failure on Chris Paul, on Devin Booker, on Monty Williams. I said some horrific things about James Jones in the immediate aftermath. I told him to get the fuck out of town if he wasn't prepared.
It's a failure of James Jones as well.
If he wasn't prepared to grow some balls and make a move, and then sure enough, he went after Kevin Durant and it didn't work out. My point is, I don't know where this idea is coming from that everyone has only been out to get DeAndre Ayton. I just don't think it's true. I think this was a shared burden by everyone on the team in the wake of that disaster. And I don't think Ayton, I mean, he's taken some of it, but I don't think he's taken any more of it than any of these other guys.
It's nowhere close to what Devin Booker gets literally anytime he says anything on the internet. Honestly. I mean, like, literally, Devin Booker hate moves the needle more than anything I've seen on Twitter in the last year. So, yeah, it's nothing even close.
Let me say one more thing just to demonstrate that, actually, because people are going to point out the fact that we're only, like, it wasn't just Ayton here to talk about at Media Day either. I think the worst quote of the day actually goes to Chris Paul, where...
I'm less bothered by this than you, but I like that you're bothered by it.
How are you less bothered by this? Let me read Gerald's tweet here. Right?
Okay.
So the quote is, honestly, not really. And then Gerald says, asked Chris Paul about whether there was anything he learned or dwelled on after Game 7, but he said for him, it was about getting away and spending time with his family to reset. Said he feels good after a longer offseason. Okay, the second part, the second half of the tweet, fine. Spend time with your family. Feel good after a longer offseason, Chris. I'm there. I'm with you. I'm all with you. And even part of the first sentence, I'm not. No one's asking them to dwell on Game 7, but to say, no, I didn't learn anything from the worst loss of my career and the worst loss in franchise history. What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? What do you mean you don't have a problem with that? That's easily the worst quote of the day.
I'll tell you why. I think he had COVID. Honestly. And I think when he thinks about that game, he probably thinks about the fact that it was hard to breathe and he had a headache and a fever and he felt like shit. And he can't say anything about that because I think they would get in trouble for playing players
even if that's
that
true.
had COVID. This is all speculation for the record. But I think if you're a player in that game and you're aware of the fact that multiple players did not feel right and things were wrong that they're not allowed to say publicly, they're going to take something different away from that game than we are.
That's fine.
Because they have more information available for that game. And I think for somebody like Chris Paul, what he wants to do is answer that question in a way where he doesn't have to talk about it anymore. So he said the least amount of stuff as possible, and he just wants to move on. And that's it.
Okay, but Chris...
And that doesn't really bother me.
Chris should be a better... He knows how to be a better diplomat than that. And so even if that is what he's thinking, and by all means, I'm not 100% with you on the... I understand where your theory is coming from. But even if that's what he's thinking about the fact that he wasn't 100% or he had COVID or whatever... Yeah. Say something better than, no, I didn't learn anything from the worst loss of my career. If you want us to take you seriously, because it all comes back to this. It all comes back to this. Right, Mike? For me to believe this year, I'm going to do this podcast shit regardless, right? We're going to be here. We're going to talk about all the games. We're going to do the playbacks. We're going to get back on the YouTube channel at some point. I swear to God. We're going to do all this stuff. We're going to cover the team. I'm excited. I'm excited for regular season basketball to return. For me to believe in the prospect of them winning a championship, I need the players to believe.
Yeah.
If the players don't even believe, and quotes like that make me think
we need Javon Carter.
Quotes like that make me think that maybe he doesn't even believe anymore. That's concerning.
Yeah. I mean, fair. That's fair. But having said that, that came after the whole rant that we had about not taking anything from media day too seriously. So I don't care.
Okay, that's fair.
I just
that's
don't
fair.
care that
you
much.
just played a trump card on me. That's all right. Whatever. Let's move on to the next segment. Let's talk about Devin.
Well, I think I want to talk more about media day.
All right.
On Patreon. If we have more on that, I think maybe we'll try to have someone on that was there and talk to them about that for our Patreon episode. So we'll do more. But let's take a break now, and when we come back, we're finally going to get to it. We're going to have an internal development episode on Devin Booker. We will be right back. All right, Devin Booker, internal development. Let's get into it. It's just me and you for this one, no guest. Shout out to David who joined us last year. He wasn't able to come on this one, but I'm excited to talk about Devin Booker because I think this is one of the more fascinating seasons. I think we saved the most interesting episodes for last as far as Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton because both of them I think had a fascinating season this last season. For the format, for those who haven't heard it, who he is and what he can improve on, how confident we are he improves on those things. Those are the three questions we try and answer with internal development. The idea being, in order to understand where a player can improve, we have to first set a baseline of who they are and then go from there. So first, let's talk about Devin Booker and who he is. I'm just going to list some stuff that happened last season, and we'll start from there, Sam. First of all, Devin Booker was in the top 5 for MVP last season. He got MVP votes. 76 people, in fact, voted for cast votes for Devin Booker in the top 5 of the MVP race last season. ESPN ranked him a top 10 player going into the season this season on their ESPN rank. Now, keep in mind, ranking players is bad analysis. I'll say it every year. He was on the cover of NBA 2K23 this year. He will be on the cover all year. And he averaged essentially 27, 5, and 5 last year. That's a basic starting point. I know we have a lot more to talk about with Devin Booker, but what's your reaction to all of that so far?
Oh, yeah. What a year for this guy, right? I mean, we've known who Devin Booker has been for a long time, which is why my reaction is kind of two-sided or two-faced because, like, none of this is a surprise to us in a way. Mm-hmm. There are certain, like, once we start nitpicking, like, little elements of his game, I think we're going to find things where it's like, oh, that's surprising. But, like, overall, I'm talking about the overall player who Devin Booker is, who he's become as a scorer. there's been no question that he could be the most prolific or among the most talented or among the most optimized, whatever word you want to use, scorers in the NBA. We've thought that for several seasons. And I think we've always thought that that could translate to, yeah, he's a top 10 player in the league. Yeah, he's getting MVP votes, even if he doesn't win the whole thing. But you need team success in order to get there. And it's always a 1 year or 2 year lag. It's like a lagging thing where you got to get the success first. Then everyone is going to be on your nuts for a little while. And certainly in the case of Devin Booker, not everyone is on his nuts because he has become, in the wake of this, I think, one of the most polarizing players in the NBA, if not the most polarizing superstar in the NBA.
I think that just comes with being there are people who hate Steph Curry. Like, it just comes with being one of the best players in the NBA.
There are people
but I agree with you. There are people who just hate him.
There are people who hate every star. Steph Curry, but Steph Curry is not polarizing. You can tell. You can find people who hate Steph Curry.
It's just LeBron fans, yeah.
Yeah, LeBron. I mean, I don't know, dude. I think how about out of
I agree with that. I agree with you.
How about this? Out of the young players,
yeah,
particularly this crop, I think that's coming up right now of young Americans. Compare Booker to Donovan Mitchell does not have as many haters. Jason Tatum, I don't think has as many haters. Who else is there? Trae Young, outside of the city of New York, doesn't have as many haters. John Morant doesn't have as many haters. I think there's this element to Book in particular. And look, I'll be the first one to admit that maybe we're a little hypersensitive to this because we see all of the stuff around Book. We see all of the 100%. Discourse constantly. But it
does move the needle, though. It moves the needle.
I really do feel like he has launched himself into a position where he is basically unanimously respected by his peers. He is almost unanimously respected in the media. I honestly do believe that by the national media, at least to a certain extent at this point, when in terms of being like, everyone's on the same page about him at least being a top 15, top 20 player, I think.
Oh, yeah.
You start to I think you're right.
Definitely top 20.
You start to get to certain fans and certain NBA 2K type discourse, and that's where it falls apart a little bit. But it comes with the territory. Devin Booker has always he's always longed for the spotlight in a way, I think, and he's finally got it.
Well, I think if we're just going to have a quick conversation on why he's so hated, eliminating both LA teams, like turning a whole city that's like one of the largest cities in the world against you. That's a lot of people that are going to hate him just from that alone. And then like Jokic, 2-time MVP, eliminating Jokic and being pretty cocky on the way to doing it in a sweep. That's probably not going to help. I don't think the Pelican series had like a big impact on like average fans, to be honest.
I think New Orleans fans hate us now a little bit, but that's every fan base.
I almost feel like they hate Chris Paul and Jay Crowder more, although they would love Jay Crowder on that team right now. Yeah. He'd make them a contender. And then I think going against Doncic, who is like, there's just a contingent of fans that just absolutely love Doncic, so they're going to hate whoever is his perceived enemies. And I think Devin Booker did not really make it difficult to make it clear, at least, that he doesn't like Doncic. I would say, like that was pretty clear, I'd say. But let's move on from this perception. Let's talk about him as a player. This is where we delve into some of the stats. I think the biggest difference in his game this year is something that we had been talking about for a long time. And this is that he shot a career high on pull-up three-pointers. I'm guessing this was part of your notes, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's only the thing I've been talking about for 5 straight years. So
255 total attempts on pull-up three-pointers. He shot 35.7% on pull-up three-pointers. Now, I'm going to say this. You might hear that and think it's not that high. But in comparison to some players that he's compared to, Paul George shot 32% on pull-up three-pointers. Zach LaVine, 36% on pull-up three-pointers. James Harden, 35% on pull-up three-pointers. These are all players who are thought to have a better skill at shooting that pull-up three than Devin Booker. Devin Booker's right there with all three of them at this point. And 35% on pull-up threes, that's like really good. It's not like Kevin Durant, who shot, by the way, Kevin Durant shot 40% on pull-up three-pointers last year. I looked it up.
You don't have
How absurd is that?
You don't have the spreadsheet in front of you, do you?
No, I just wrote down those guys.
I was about to ask random players, but I'm not going to do that to you right now.
No,
but that is absurd.
I just wanted shooting guards in order to compare them to. Those guys are relatively prototypical shooting guards. Paul George can kind of play 2 through 4, obviously.
Yeah,
he's kind of a shooting guard.
High octane wing scorers. All of them they fall into the same umbrella.
It was huge for him to develop that pull-up 3 this year, and I think that's one of the reasons he was sort of viewed as the player that he was this last year. Obviously, like you said, you've been begging for it for years.
Yeah, and look, when we had such a great conversation, I think, with David last year about what Booker needed to improve, I think we all talked about the same 3 things. But I guess I'll ignore the other 2 parts of them and just talk. We all talked about shooting. We all talked about pull-up shooting specifically. But I think that conversation and how we framed it last year was not about necessarily that Booker was even starting from a point where he was a bad pull-up shooter. Like, he was still capable of occasionally giving you those performances. It was just about how can we add another 5 to 10% production on top of these things that he's already good at. And I think certainly, particularly with the pull-up shooting, he was able to do it. My next point, should I even talk about things that are like negatives at this point, or are we just focusing on...
let's hold off on that.
Okay.
Let me just stay on the 3-point shooting. He also shot a pretty absurd percentage on catch and shoots, 43.6% on catch and shoots. Overall, I think this is probably, even if it's not necessarily by percentage, I do think this was probably his best year from 3. 38% total. The thing about Devin Booker that I think a lot of people don't realize when thinking about him as a player is that he still shoots a lot more pull-up attempts than catch and shoots. He's on the ball more often than he's not. As well, people just don't leave him when he's standing in the corner, right? They're going to stay on him because he's obviously a great catch and shoot 3-point shooter. So his ability to maximize what he can do from 3 on pull-ups is particularly important for him because he'll just get so many more of those. It also puts a specific kind of pressure on the defense in that they can't really go under on screens. They have to really stay up on him in transition when he has the ball because he can launch it from 3 at any moment. Previous to this last year, I think a lot of people hated when he did that in transition. This year, that actually ended up being a pretty good shot for him, pulling up in transition. But overall, he shot 38% from 3 total. And here's a stat I've been excited to give you, Sam, because I just stumbled upon it, and I think it's a pretty fascinating one. This last season, Devin Booker played like 60-something games. He had missed some games due to injury. He had 20 games where he made 4 or more 3-pointers this last season. In those 20 games where he made 4 or more 3-pointers, the Suns were 19-1. How crazy is that?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to be afraid when we start pulling out correlations and saying necessarily this means that if Booker takes 15 threes per game next season, everything's going to be fine. But it just makes sense when you think about the logic of specifically, it was the last check, the last thing that Booker kind of had to check off in his offensive repertoire in order to fully bend the defense to his will and to specifically force defenses to come out, be a little bit more aggressive. To the point where now defenses, I feel like, are often a lot more aggressive with Devin Booker.
I think it led to the traps that we saw in the postseason,
especially in the playoffs. And so now you need kind of a counterweight. You need or just counters to it in general, and that's going to come mostly from the other guys. So that's not so much in this conversation. But it's just about versatility and about providing the offense as much spacing as possible. And it's great that he's finally able to achieve it, man. I mean, the difference here, one thing we talked about last year as well, is Booker's always been a great corner shooter. I think because corner threes do tend to be those plays where he doesn't get a lot of them, but they tend to be pretty wide open. They're kind of like, last play in the offense after everything else and the defense breaks down. Pass sends up in the corner and you typically have a pretty good look. His corner 3-point shooting this year actually regressed a little bit from the elite point where it was before. But what that means is his above the break shooting rose from 32.5% to 38.5% in one season, which is just like kind of absurd, a 6% rise in above the break shooting, which traditionally is pretty difficult at the NBA level, especially with a lot of those shots coming a few feet behind the line. So yeah, I mean, it's just all crucial all around for him.
Yeah, and I think that it shows just how hard he worked on it more than anything else. I think that was something that he knew he could improve on, and he just put a ton of work into it. And I think it shows. It really made a difference for him. and it shows throughout the season. I think what that 19-1 stat more than anything else illustrates is that when his 3-point shot is dropping, there's just kind of nothing you can do to stop him. There's just nothing you can do, because it's almost like, obviously he's got the mid-range. He can drive. He can get to the rim. We'll talk about that more, I think, as far as when he can improve this coming season. But like, he can do it all: mid-range, 3-point shooting, and at the rim. And like a lot of times with Devin Booker, previous to this last season, if he's shooting up that pull-up three, defenses are thinking, "Oh, thank God, we got him to shoot the most difficult one." Mm-hmm. And he hasn't been great. I think he shot like 30% last year. So that the increase was 5%.
They'll take a 30% pull-up three any day. If that's your only option versus a guy who's completely elite in the mid-range or can take you. Booker dipped a little bit in the past couple of years, but traditionally had been a guy. He had some insane finishing numbers a couple of seasons ago, like in the Ricky Rubio year, and even when the Suns were a 19-win team. So they were begging him to take that shot, and now they can no longer fall back on that.
Exactly. And I think that puts a ton of pressure on defenses, just like you said. Career bests for Devin Booker this year: field goals. He made the most field goals per game on average. 3-point percentage. He tied his career best in 3-point percentage. Career best in rebounds. Career best in steals. Career best in blocks. Career best in turnover percentage. So the lowest of his career in turnover percentage. Career best in win shares, in VORP. And then just wins. They won the most games they ever had. In fact, in games that Devin Booker played, which was 68 games total, the Suns were 57-11 in those games. Just incredible record when he played this last season. And that record, of course, if you look for any Suns player last season, is going to look good. But as far as the best players for the Suns, like by wins, Devin Booker had the largest impact when it comes to the best players on the Suns this last year. Really, really impressive.
Devin Booker.
There's two more things too. Mm-hmm.
Impacts winning basketball. I know that's been obvious. I know that's been obvious for a while, but I almost feel like we need to take the moment to celebrate a little bit that here we are in 2022, and it's just such an obvious thing that we can say. Devin Booker impacts winning basketball, and anyone who ever questioned that 4 or 5 years ago was an idiot then, and they're an idiot now, and they need to eat dirt because of that. Continue, Mike.
Clutch. That's a word, right? That Devin Booker was this last season. As far as players that shot like 50 or more field goal attempts, he was the most clutch player in the NBA, basically. 57%, essentially 56.9% to be honest, from the field. In clutch times, over 40% from three in that time as well. And plus 97 as a player in clutch minutes so far this season, which are all basically towards the top of the NBA. He was incredibly clutch this last season, and I think that's something that for the Suns, if he's not that, and if Chris Paul is not that in this coming season, it would be like a severe drop in wins, because in clutch games, they were 26-6. That's absurd. When Devin Booker played in the clutch, 26-6.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
I think, to be honest, when the Vegas lines, I assume the Vegas lines are out. I just haven't looked at them. We'll need to look at them at some point. But a lot that will go into that is the fact that if you look at the Suns' expected record last season, just based on their point differential, they were expected to be really good. I'm talking about just purely net rating, how many points you score, how many points you allow. The mathematical algorithm, Pythagorean theorem, I think they call it, would have expected 58, 59 wins. Instead, they got 64 purely because they were outperforming that algorithm. They were outperforming that formula in the clutch. They kept winning games that they were supposed to lose, and that came down mainly to Chris Paul and Devin Booker and their ability to finish.
Mm-hmm. And he was pretty incredible this last year. You could feel very confident, and I thought it was particularly fun. Last season was really fun. I know people might not remember this. First of all, they would clamp down on defense, but also Devin Booker came in kind of late into games to close out the fourth quarter, because he would generally play the entire third quarter, and then Chris Paul would come in at the beginning of the fourth quarter, or Cameron Payne would play a few minutes without Chris Paul, and then Chris Paul would play usually the entirety of the last 5, 6, 7 minutes of the game. Devin Booker maybe sometimes the last 4 minutes or something like that. But there was a moment where Devin Booker would come into the game. As a Suns fan, you would think, all right, it's over now. And you were usually right. 26-6. Most of the time, the Suns end up winning in those scenarios. So like a large majority of the time. So it was really fun to watch Devin Booker this last season. The other thing I want to talk about before we move on to things he can improve on, I think that'll be an interesting conversation. And of course, if you have anything else, Sam, we'll get to that too.
Yeah, maybe.
Defensively, Devin Booker, I think, improved this last season a lot. And I think it's actually kind of hard to quantify that, as it has been with defensive play in general. But I think the Suns being one of the best defensive teams in the NBA, and Devin Booker essentially playing the most minutes outside of Mikal Bridges, is first of all, you start there. That's a good sign. That means at the very least he can exist on a team defense that is the best or close to the best in the NBA, playing the amount of minutes that he does. I did look at like some of the catch-all advanced stats that try to quantify defense in the best way possible. The only one that has him rated as below average is the LeBron stat, which is the B-Ball Index proprietary stat. Raptor, which is the 538 stat. RAPM, which is like an adjusted plus-minus stat. BPM, which is like an adjusted plus-minus stat as well. All three of those either rate him as good or average at the very least. I think Raptor in particular, which is a 538 one, has him as like a good defender.
I don't know all of the particular differences in these proprietary.
They don't share it
because they don't share it, right?
They don't tell
but
us.
But I can guess a couple of things. First of all, net rating, like it doesn't matter what the perception is of you as a defender. If you log a lot of minutes on a team with a top 5 defensive rating, your advanced defensive stats, first of all, it's just logical to assume that you're playing a part in that. You're not going to be able to completely hide every possession, right? But eventually that perception is going to shift, and those advanced stats are going to shift because they're going to recognize the impact that you are having in those particular lineups on those net ratings. The other thing is, you mentioned earlier that Devin Booker had a career high in steals this year. And I don't know.
Still not a ton, though.
Not a ton, but I don't know if you looked any more into it. I thought it was kind of interesting. I did look on the B-Ball Index. He ranked in the 82nd percentile this year in steals, up from the 60s last year. And he also ranked 43rd percentile in deflections, which was up from pretty putrid 17th percentile in deflections the year before. So I think what we've always talked about with Devin Booker is he's a guy with a 6'8" wingspan. We've never expected him to be the most disruptive perimeter defender out there.
He has short arms for an NBA player, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
of course they're insanely long.
We've always just expected him to be able to hang with his position and, be a multi-positional defender in the sense that I think he could take 2 or 3 positions, not that he can take all 5.
Which he does, according to the data.
Mm-hmm. This year, it was a little bit different. Like, for a guy who does not have the greatest physical advantages there, he was starting to get more steals. He was starting to get more deflections. And first of all, to return to the original point, that's going to impact those advanced stats. It's going to boost them. But the other thing it does, I think it just reflects a confidence that Booker has. Maybe the continuity played a part in it, that he specifically was able to trust in a defensive scheme where he knew he had the help of Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton kind of behind him. And he was just able to pick his spots a little bit better. But whatever he was doing, it ended up being kind of his best by the numbers defensive season to date.
And I think you can if you're just looking at the playoffs, they're not switching Devin Booker on to guys to try to take advantage of Devin Booker, which you would think that other teams would want to do, to like force Devin Booker to guard other guys. And he just does a good job. He did a good job in the Pelican series when he was healthy. He did a good job on Luka. In fact, by the stats, he's one of the better defenders on Luka. In the Mavs series, they never really tried to switch Devin Booker onto Luka. They preferred, of course, Chris Paul.
Chris Paul
or DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah, who got cooked, yep.
Or even, to be honest, Jay Crowder a little bit more. And, of course, Cameron Johnson, if he was ever in. It was never really Devin Booker, which I think when it comes to strategies in the playoffs, it's not just that you want to force Devin Booker to guard, assuming that he's a bad defender or whatever. You also want to wear him out as much as possible. So for other teams to be not even willing to try that over and over again, I think is a sign of how he's improved as well. And I think, it's hard to find stats to show this kind of thing, and people are still stuck in their old thinking about Devin Booker. Shout out Mark Jones, who I think did a lot for Devin Booker's reputation on defense in the playoffs when he kept calling him a two-way player, a two-way star in the NBA, which but I don't know if he's that, but he's definitely not bad, which I think is great.
He has his moments. He has his highlights. And again, the perception catches up eventually. You can only go so long denying Booker's status as, at the very least, a competent defensive player if his team keeps showing up in the top 5 in defensive rankings again and again. So if it happens again this season, it's just going to change more people's minds, ultimately.
Yep.
Before we move on here, I think we absolutely need to talk about playmaking. And
yes,
I mean, this was the first time that Booker surpassed a 2.0 assist to turnover ratio. And just to read out the last 4 years, he was at 1.64, then 1.73 with Rubio, 1.40 in the first Chris Paul year. It dipped a lot, I think, as he had fewer ball handling responsibilities, was asked to be the guy with the ball in his hands less in general and make fewer just reads. He had fewer potential assists, if you want to look at a specific stat, right? Like that's when the potential assist number cratered. So he goes down to 1.4 last year with Chris Paul, and this year he shoots up in a year where, by the way, Booker continues to be the most sacrificial superstar in the NBA. He continues to average far fewer touches per game than any of these other superstars. He continues to blow them all out of the water in that points per touch statistic for like the 4th year in a row. So nothing about the way that Devin Booker is used in the offense has really changed substantially. And in spite of all that, he sets a career high in assist to turnover ratio. It shoots up to above 2 this season. And I think that absolutely deserves a lot of praise, but specifically the ball handling aspect of it. Last year we had an extended conversation on the fact that B-Ball Index, they track the number of bad pass turnovers versus the number of lost ball turnovers so that you can actually kind of isolate it and identify, is a guy committing more turnovers because he's struggling to make accurate reads, or is he committing more turnovers because he's getting plucked frequently by the defense? For Booker, his ratio between the two has always kind of been similar. This past year, I think in the past, again, you could always kind of have made the argument that Booker had a little bit more of an issue with the dribbling aspect than he did with the passing aspect, and that's something we talked about. This year, he committed only 37 lost ball turnovers. It was the lowest number of lost ball turnovers he's committed since his rookie season. It was a substantial drop from last year, even though his bad pass turnovers did not drop substantially. So essentially what we saw is that Booker had the best assist turnover ratio of his career because his assist numbers went up, but also his turnovers went down, specifically his ball handling turnovers. He took much better care of the basketball this year. I think there's a couple reasons behind that I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on as well. But yeah, just some credit for him there. We asked him to improve it, and he just did.
It was important.
100%.
Yeah, there were times at the beginning when Chris Paul first got here where Devin Booker was just throwing the ball away pretty badly a few times a game when they were first getting used to it. It got better towards the end of the season, but this last season in particular, the 2022 season, was great. I think he just did a great job. It is wild. I was just looking back at some of his stats now. When he averaged 6.8 assists in his career, when DeAndre Ayton's first year in the NBA, Devin Booker averaged 6.8 assists, which is just crazy. Of course, the Suns had no point guards at the time, but thinking about him averaging 6.8 assists on a team where 2 players shot over 35% from 3 in TJ Warren and Troy Daniels, those are the only 2 players that could even shoot on that team, is kind of, and TJ Warren, only played 43 games that season too.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot.
Nobody could shoot, and he still averaged 6.8 assists.
A lot of Josh Jackson minutes that season. A lot of Elliot Kobo minutes. DeAnthony Melton minutes that season. DeAnthony Melton could shoot now. At the time, he absolutely could not. So yeah, it was bleak for sure.
It absolutely was, and it's just kind of wild to think about his ability to average that. Yeah, Josh Jackson 4th in minutes on the team that season. The top 3 though: Mikal Bridges, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. So, and by the way, Mikal Bridges came into the league that year, missed 0 games, and played the most minutes on the team that season. Just random thing that I just said.
And I think specifically, why is this important? Why is playmaking important for Devin Booker? I think we still don't necessarily give him proper respect in terms of recognizing exactly what his gravity does in the offense. I know that seems pretty simple, and you think we would by now, but I remember when we had this conversation also last year with David, and he brought up a great point that it was specifically Booker's passes to other guys that were leading to great percentages from three. And this was a little bit surprising to me, and it kind of shattered a little bit of my preconceived notions about Chris Paul as a player. Not to say that it takes anything away from Chris Paul as a playmaker, but for the second straight year, you look at certain guys' three-point percentages off a pass from Devin Booker versus off a pass from Chris Paul, and there's a noticeable difference. Jay Crowder shot 15% better. Mike, this is a crazy stat in my opinion. He shot 15% better on threes last season, receiving a pass from Devin Booker versus receiving a pass from Chris Paul. 15%.
Before you move on to other players, I'll just say that in particular, Chris Paul threw the grenade to Jay Crowder more than anyone else. When the shot clock was running out and two guys just converge onto Chris Paul, he would just throw the ball at Jay Crowder behind the three-point line, setting him up for failure over and over and over again. Hey, if that's Cameron Johnson this coming season, it's going to look a lot better.
Whereas,
go on.
But just to illustrate the effect there and why that makes sense, right? Just because Booker is a lot more comfortable dribbling into traffic and then rising up and taking the shot, even if it's a contested shot, he does not always get high quality looks because he doesn't need high quality looks to convert those into buckets. So if Booker's passing out to you versus Chris Paul, where like he'd rather pass out to you to begin with. But if Booker's passing out to you, safe to say, his gravity has already drawn in a couple of defenders, and you're going to be more wide open than you would be if you're just getting that pass from Chris Paul. And that absolutely...
And he's taller.
He's taller.
Can send it across the court easier.
Helps a lot, 100%. But so that absolutely helps with Jay Crowder. Cam Johnson shot 10% better on threes. Yeah, that's Cam Johnson. Wild. Like think about... And look, some of this, like we're talking about... Anytime you have a smaller sample, you have a higher variance, and so stuff swings a lot. But like you're talking about one who we consider to be at this point one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA. A 10% swing, depending on who's passing him the ball in his 3-point percentage, is huge. If you can get a 10% boost to Cam Johnson's 3-point percentage, and suddenly when Booker's passing him the ball, he's like a 48% 3-point shooter or something, whatever he was last year, that's insane. Yeah.
And he's been great off Booker passes through his whole career, basically.
And that's all. It's all Booker's playmaking. It's all his gravity. That's all him. That's just to the purest, fullest extent demonstrating the effect of what Devin Booker specifically is doing in the Suns' offense. So yeah, he deserves a lot of credit. I will say
that if we're going to sort of transition to what he can improve on. The biggest difference between Chris Paul and Devin Booker as a playmaker is I don't think anybody in the NBA is better at setting up players at the rim than Chris Paul. Whereas Devin Booker kind of struggles with that in comparison. I think Devin Booker, it is a gravity thing. I actually agree with you. He's on his way to the rim often when he's passing out to the guys in the corners, to the guys behind the 3-point line, and the defense is converging on him near the paint. And that's how he finds shooters so well. But like the difference in Chris Paul's ability to set up DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker's ability to set up DeAndre Ayton is pretty huge. Chris Paul sets up DeAndre Ayton. That's the person who assists DeAndre Ayton the most by a lot. Devin Booker's still the second most in that stat. But I do think that their chemistry, although I think it's good, it still could be better, right? I do feel like they need to find ways to work on their chemistry together for this team to really hit the heights that it probably can hit going forward, especially in scenarios where maybe Chris Paul isn't going to play. At a certain point, I think with Chris Paul, you even have to think about maybe not, this is going to sound crazy, not closing out a game, because if they're just picking on him defensively, as he gets older, maybe it's a good idea to take him out of the game and just put a defender in there and let Devin Booker run the offense. And that means that his chemistry with DeAndre Ayton has to get a little better, I think.
I don't disagree with that proposition at all about sitting Chris Paul sometimes to close a game. I just think it's kind of a hard it's hard to sell him on that. So that's going to be the main obstacle you run into there. But yeah, I think the name of the game this season is, and I think the reason we are properly closing the series with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton is because we understand that these two guys can run the show. Mikal Bridges can improve. Cam Johnson can improve. We already had those discussions. But if you get the extra 15% marginal improvement or whatever we want out of Devin Booker, Ayton I think needs a little bit more seasoning than that, right? He needs a little bit more improvement than just talking about taking what you're already good at and adding 5% to it. But these two guys, they can run the show, and if these two guys can figure out how to play together in some specific lineup combinations, it could look. It already looks really good, but it could just look completely, totally dominant. It depends on a couple things.
Now, this is one I think you probably have too. I have two stats to illustrate something with Devin Booker. Now, we talked about his pull-up three-point shooting and his overall three-point shooting just being so great this last season. The other end of that is his shots at the rim. Now, Devin Booker, like you said, he has had seasons in his career where he's been, by the numbers, one of the best finishers in the NBA. Now, he's not getting there like Zion. He's not getting there like LeBron. But when he does get there, he has been, at times, one of the best, shooting over 70% at the rim. When it comes to shots in the restricted area, this last season, he shot 2.9 per game. In the season previous to that, he shot 4.1 per game. And here's another stat to help illustrate that. Drives per game, this last season, 9.7. In the previous season, 13.4 drives per game. Those sound low. That's pretty high. It's not like SGA who drives 21 times a game or whatever, but it's still pretty high. 13.4 is probably more where he should be as far as drives per game. I think there was some element of trying to remain healthy, and the Suns were so capable of winning games without that. But these two things combined, like less drives, less shots in the restricted area, led to a career low in free throw attempt rate, which I think for Devin Booker to have, I think, like what could be considered his MVP season, his best season of his career, he has to somehow combine what he did from the three-point line in his pull-up threes with his absurd finishing and getting to the rim, which will automatically, I think, increase his free throw attempt rate.
Yep.
All three of those things combined, if he's able to do that, I think leads to like the 30 points per game season.
Just to confirm, are we fully in the what does he need to improve on aspects of the conversation now? Okay.
Unless you have anything else you want to add.
No, not at all. I just want to make sure we had done that segue for sure.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, look, so this is the bittersweet element about it, right? Booker had his best shooting performance of his career, his best shooting season. But unfortunately, the way that he found those extra like 1.5 or 2 3-point attempts per game that he took, I was hoping that he would take those attempts from the mid-range pile, right? Like take 2 or 3 of those mid-range attempts and like stack them on top of the 3-point pile, but keep the rim stuff, because the rim stuff is really important, particularly as you get into the playoffs and nothing is easy anymore, and they try to shut it down, but you need to force yourself through that wall. Instead, what we saw happen was that he got those couple of extra 3-point attempts, but he took them directly from his rim attempts. And he kept the mid-range attempts exactly the same. So when you look at the actual, like, just Devin Booker's true shooting percentage from season to season, it didn't actually improve, because getting shots at the rim is the most efficient offense.
Well, free throws are the most efficient offense.
Free throws,
and
plus
he got less of those.
Driving to the basket, which creates rim attempts plus free throws at the same time, that is the most efficient basketball. And when you start taking that away, even if you're a really, really good pull-up shooter, it's difficult to build a completely dominant offensive portfolio from an efficiency standpoint out of that. Go ahead.
I just want to add that I don't necessarily think of this as like a criticism of his season last year. I think he's finding the balance. And I think once his 3-point shot was hitting the way it was, especially in the first half of the season, I think he was just on fire from 3. He's sort of finding that. But I also think there's an element of taking what the defense is giving you, which he needs to do every year. Where in this last year, I think he was shooting threes a little bit more to start the season, because they were giving him that pull-up 3 a little bit more than I think they probably will going forward. And he needs to find ways, like you said, instead of turning those into mid-range attempts, finding ways to get to the rim. Now, just he can't be reckless, obviously.
Right.
And be smart with it, but get those free throw attempts.
And that's the reason that, like, also just to demonstrate that I'm not trying to overly criticize here, you can't have your cake and eat it too, in the sense that I just praise Booker for having the fewest lost ball turnovers of his career, the best assist to turnover ratio, his objectively his best playmaking season, right? A lot of that comes from not dribbling all the way to the rim, where potentially you can have some reckless possessions and be stripped, and more often just stopping in that elbow area and rising up for a basic mid-range shot or taking the three, right? It would make sense that you can't necessarily have both of those things at the same time, that if Booker now suddenly transitioned back into the mode of hitting the high gear and going full speed, that maybe those turnover numbers do actually go up a little bit. But in order to push past the obstacles that the Suns are currently facing in the playoffs, where rim gravity is just so important, and you need to get it from somewhere, and you know you're not going to get it from Chris Paul, I do agree that we need a little bit more from Booker in that department. We just, like, free throws, it's just easy basketball, and you can't turn down easy points in the offense.
Oh, and I just want to reiterate, if he does what he did from the three-point line, 43.6% catch and shoots, basically almost 36% on pull-up threes, and somehow gets back to the career-high free throw attempt rate that he had, which was when he was driving to the rim like close to 15 times per game, I really think that's like 30 points per game. Like, I think he's basically getting up into like pure MVP discussion throughout the season. But it's just, it's tough.
Yeah, I have no doubt about that. I think what's difficult about this as we approach it from the most realistic perspective possible is, how old is Devin Booker now? I should know for this episode. Did he turn 26
this month? Right.
Yeah.
Doesn't he have your birthday? You should know. You should be the person who knows the most.
Yeah, we actually do share a birthday. He turns 26 in a month. What the hell was I going to say? You distracted
the perspective.
Me.
You want to put it into perspective.
Yeah, I want to put it into perspective, but I may have lost my train of thought. Oh, that he's young. Right. Okay. So some people talk about Booker. He's about to turn 26, and they talk about, well, he hasn't even hit his prime yet. And I think it's a little bit of a misguided notion. I think we're already seeing...
It's now.
His prime is right now. Well, and even like the unfortunate reality of this is that we are already seeing the trickle-down effects of Booker maybe being past what I would call only his athletic prime. Like the hamstring injuries and kind of the little nicks and tears that one develops over 6 or 7 years of NBA basketball.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Devin Booker has played a lot of minutes of NBA basketball already, and I think it's possible that we're seeing him play this more conservative brand of basketball, embracing shooting, not being as willing to go all the way to the rim, because he's already kind of past his absolute athletic prime in terms of speed. Now, that doesn't mean he's out of his prime, because I think he's gained so much skill and expertise.
They're two different things, right? I think, but like, you can have your prime season, like as far as stats, and just be sort of not necessarily at your athletic prime, because I do think that's actually been sort of calculated, and like they do believe that a player can reach their athletic prime a little earlier than people think, and their actual prime as far as stats a little later than that.
But I think,
and that's usually relatively normal.
I think how that manifests itself is that, of course, Booker could have that 30 point per game season any year now. I think it could absolutely come any particular year if everything hits right for him, and that would be the MVP season. And then after that, people would proclaim that to be his peak, right? But I think we're kind of the most likely scenario is that Booker is the type of player who's going to have a long, sustained prime that I think lasts over many years. We've already kind of seen it, like 3 or 4 straight years.
Done the same thing in stats, yeah.
I don't think the stats are going to change that much at this point, because I think, like, very, very slowly, I'm not expecting a big, I'm not saying he's cooked, his hamstrings are cooked or whatever.
Yeah, of course
We're seeing a very slow athletic decline over like the next 10 years or whatever, as the skill and the expertise increases, and how it manifests is just kind of a sustained plateau for a while. Because think about the ideal, like, I don't know, to use an extreme example, like imagine what you could get if you combined the brain of 36-year-old Chris Paul and like the body of 22-year-old Russell Westbrook, right? Like that would be like the best NBA player ever, or the best NBA point guard ever in that particular case, I guess. But it just doesn't work that way. And, you know, when we talk about guys' primes, the traditional thinking of, he's going to hit his prime age 27, 28, 29. If you've already suffered a couple injuries at that point, it can be a little tough. And you can start to see guys pursue various types of avoidant behavior because of it. I think that's what we're seeing with Book.
Yeah, I mean, just being capable of shooting pull-up threes, that's a career extender. It really is, I think, and that's something that'll be good for him.
Why, like, to go back to him real quick, it's why Westbrook sucks so hard now. It's like, you know, imagine if he had a pull-up
And it's
three.
also what Dame is like when, you know, Dame can be pretty good for a long time if he's not injured. But just to go back to about his age and his consistency, he started averaging 26 points per game at 22 years old. That's pretty wild. He came into the NBA at 18 years old and already has a career average in points per game at 23.5 points per game. And that's somebody who came into the league as an 18-year-old. That's pretty wild. Like that, it's just insane how consistent he's been. Now, back to what he can improve on now. I'll say this. I don't think necessarily Devin Booker. I don't necessarily want Devin Booker to get to 13.4 drives per game, back to that amount, if it means sacrificing that pull-up 3-point thing that he's doing right now, because it's just one. They both have a large impact on the offense, but he needs to just find the right balance between the two. And like you said, maybe that means less mid-range shoot. Maybe it just means more shots in general. Maybe he actually ends up taking more shots, and it'll be interesting to see how they find that balance going forward this season, and see if it's something that he does increase or he doesn't. I do think we want to talk about something that he needs to work on as far as I try to focus on the playoffs, because I think with Devin Booker, the improvements that you talk about with him are so specific because he's good at so many things. We got to talk about him being trapped and how that impacts, I think, the offense. And for Booker, he needs to find ways to attack traps. And I think that he's like physically limited in ways that players like LeBron James or even Luka Doncic are not, in that he's just not as big as those players. But I do think strategically there are ways for him to find different passes, maybe a little bit faster, or trying to attack before the trap gets there. Things like that. I think those things, they're small, but they could have the biggest impact as far as the playoffs. The way to guard Devin Booker right now, and this is a team problem. I want to be clear.
It's
a team problem.
I mean, like there's only so much you can do. But I know what you mean.
But I do think he can get off the ball a little faster to the right players. And I think that would help him a little bit when it comes to traps. And I do think that finding ways to force them in a position where it's difficult for them to not foul him in those scenarios would probably help as well. That means putting more pressure on the rim in those trap scenarios. Yeah. But I know you're right, because he, at the same time, we're talking about him having a career low in turnovers, in turnover percentage, I should say, because there was a time where he didn't dribble at all in his first 2 years of his career. But it's a balance there too. But I do think that the Suns as a team need to find a way to do that better. You know, it's a James Jones issue. They need to put better players around him to help attack that. Chris Paul Chris Paul doesn't help much in that scenario. He's a great player, but he doesn't help when Devin Booker is being trapped over and over again.
Nope, not an off-ball threat. Continues to not be a serious catch-and-shoot threat. I mean, he can make one a game, but not, you know.
You can sag off him.
And look, again, we're talking about very structural disadvantages with Booker in that he's an amazing athlete, but he's not the fastest player. He's not the strongest player. He's not the tallest player. He's not the most explosive player. None of that is taking anything away from him. He's good at all of those things. He's just not, you know, Giannis or whatever, right?
Yeah,
so, but
LeBron,
and that's why these disadvantages are always going to exist, and so much is going to depend on really, to be honest, like Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton, I think, being the two guys who could most easily be release valves in the offense. I'm a little curious what you meant with attacking the trap earlier, just like getting in front of it a little earlier. Can you expand on what you meant by that?
Yeah, I think there are moments when a trap's coming that you can put pressure as far as trying to drive around it. And I actually think this is something that he's actually been good at earlier in his career, where this season, in his lack of attempting to get to the rim, I think that he stopped doing it a little bit. So it's essentially, if a trap's coming at you on the left and the right, it's driving on the guy on the right to get around the guy on the right, and basically forcing them to foul him. Same with the left. If you're just getting onto the hip of whatever player is on that side, I think it would help as well. Honestly, if there was 5-out system, or if they're running empty corner pick and rolls, there are structural and team things that could help all of this, and even just different plays, I think, that can help. Just not necessarily focusing on the pick and roll in those scenarios, but yeah.
Let's talk about. I think this might open up a big conversation, because in terms of what does Booker have to improve, I don't even necessarily think this is something he has to improve as much as it's something that needs to be permitted within the system for him to be unleashed a little bit, right? Because you're talking there about what you were talking about right there, attacking those traps early. Chris Paul is not going to help there either. You need the 5-out system. You need maximum spacing possible in order for that to work. Chris Paul's a guy who defenses sag off a little bit. There's not a lot of value there in that particular play in terms of what Chris Paul is bringing to the court. I think it's difficult to talk about what Booker needs to improve now, because we've seen him improve already his playmaking so much. We've seen him improve his ball handling, I think, considerably, and we've seen him improve his shooting. And yet still those touch stats reflect the same thing, that here's Devin Booker averaging 56 touches per game or whatever it was, the exact same amount 2 years in a row. Meanwhile, Donovan Mitchell's out in Utah, or now he's in Cleveland, but before he was in Utah, averaging 99 touches per game. I made that number up, but it's probably not too far off. He needs to be unleashed. One of the things that Devin Booker needs to improve on this year is just that you probably need to give him the ball more and see what he can do.
Same thing we asked for last year. Yeah.
I know, but I think...
I agree with you still.
I think we asked for it last year, but I think it's dire now in a way that it wasn't. Right, in a way that it wasn't last year, and that we really do see the end coming with Chris Paul. Or at least we really do see the ceiling with Chris Paul. Not that he's a bad player yet by any means. He's still a great player.
The more Devin Booker sacrifices for Chris Paul as the years go on, the worse it gets. It needs to be the other way around at some point.
You've arrived at a point where you have properly optimized, and I truly believe this. I think Devin Booker is the best optimized scorer in the NBA. I think, if anything, that points per touch stat proves kind of objectively, it would be that. He's optimized. That's great. You need to get out of the optimization mindset a little bit and almost scale yourself back towards just finding the right lineup combinations that unleash him a little bit more and get back to basics with Booker. I don't know, just like we've arrived at a point where if his advantages now are not necessarily so much physical, but more in terms of the brain, that Devin Booker has soaked up all of this playoff experience over the past 2 or 3 years, and we now trust him considerably more with the ball in his hands to make the right decisions. We need to get back to basics and put the right players around him. And almost, I mean...
Are you asking for point book?
Essentially...
Are we going to say it? I think it's time.
Essentially, not that you're shoving Chris Paul out of the lineup, but that sometimes, there are the right moments for it.
I'll say... 2 things on that. I think, for one, Monty Williams talked about maybe DeAndre Ayton shooting corner threes, standing in the corner a little bit more offensively. That's implying a 5-out system, including DeAndre Ayton on the floor, which I think is a good idea, and I've asked for it for a while. I also think that the idea of Devin Booker playing point book, I would like it the most if it had the largest spaced floor as possible, as you were just talking about, surrounded by capable defenders and shooters. That's the ideal scenario. I think like Josh Okogie is interesting as far as somebody who can step in and play minutes for Chris Paul. That's not necessarily an offensive threat, but he takes a lot of pressure. It takes a lot of pressure off of if somebody's just beating up on Chris Paul.
Yep.
The way Doncic was. Then you put Okogie in there. Of course, he's not going to shut down Doncic. But he's going to make it a lot harder.
It's hard with this team because I'm trying to think of what's the ideal lineup there for Booker, and you're sacrificing something somewhere with the depth that this team currently has. Okogie is really, really good. I mean, And Okogie, Mikal Bridges, we're going to see. I think there was a quote that Okogie had in Media Day today about like he had some moments, like shared some moments with Mikal Bridges as they were practicing over the past few weeks where they kind of looked at each other and were like, damn.
Yeah.
You know, like we're a couple of dogs on defense essentially. And I think watching the two of them together would be really fun. It's just critical that Okogie can actually shoot. Like if you combined him with Landry Shamet, that's the perfect role player. But unfortunately, we're not going to get the best of both worlds.
But I mean, the Suns did do like Okogie's 6'4", right? He's 6'4". He can guard a few positions at his size. Damian Lee, 6'5", can guard a few positions at his size. Hopefully his 3-point shot comes back. Ish Wainwright can play center. We've talked about that as a possibility, and his shooting seems to be getting better and better and better as we go along. Mikal Bridges, 6'6", Cameron Johnson, 6'8", and then you got Dario Saric potentially coming back and being somebody that could play some center for the Suns. I think with Devin Booker, we've tried different things as far as point book, and I think there are valid reasons why people say that doesn't work. Devin Booker needs to have a point guard. We've never surrounded him by just 4 shooters who can just shoot a lot and space the floor, including having a big like Dario Saric, where you can really experiment with that. We haven't. You say Devin Booker can't be a point book, and we surrounded by a bunch of garbage. Well, then yeah, of course he can't. Surrounded by better players, maybe we can see a little something. I don't know. I don't want to say that it's the same, but something resembling what Luka Doncic could do when he has 4 shooters around him.
I think right now it's very matchup dependent. Exactly what you're talking about with Luka Doncic. You wouldn't trust Luka Doncic to ride that system all the way to a championship, but again't certain teams it absolutely can work. And we're gonna talk about it more next week or whenever the Ayton episode comes out. So I won't talk about it too much now. But just DeAndre Ayton's kind of the key to all this, because it's nice to have 4 shooters, but again, if Booker's not going to be the guy providing rim pressure, someone needs to. And Ayton's development is so critical right now, because if you can get him to the point where Monty Williams referenced this idea of Ayton shooting more threes this year, if you can get Ayton to a point where he's giving you rim pressure, but he's also a viable floor spacer, that versatility is going to do so much in that lineup for Devin Booker.
The Brook Lopez.
In a way that Ish Wainwright, who has 0 rim pressure, he's not a lob threat, like Dario Saric, not a lob threat. Jock Landale, mostly a floor spacer, so like it's going to be difficult to make it work with a lot of these centers who are kind of just connectors or shooters, but not both. Ayton, I wouldn't really call him a connector, but he can be rim runner plus shooter, and that right there is going to do a lot for Booker specifically. And again, we were talking about them as a tandem earlier. That's why it comes up again now. Like, that's why these two guys and their ability to play together is going to continue to be so critical.
One of the fascinating things about how good the Suns have been in the last few years is that you could make a case that DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker, from both sides of that, are not perfect players to play together. They're not necessarily players that completely optimize each other's games. Yes, DeAndre Ayton plays inside, Devin Booker capably plays outside, but there are times where they need the ball is the same area, and DeAndre Ayton doesn't space the floor to allow Devin Booker to have all the space that he needs. Devin Booker, not great at passing to DeAndre Ayton on a regular basis. Good at it. I'm not saying he's bad at it, but not like Chris Paul is. And I think right now the partnership works in a way that it works because of Chris Paul. And if you're talking about playing point book with DeAndre Ayton on the floor, it needs to work better because of both of those guys doing things to optimize the other players. And if we get to the point where both of those players are doing things to optimize each other, the future is just brighter for this team going forward. And I think you make good points with that. And I think, you talk about the heliocentric thing. When we talk about it not necessarily working, we're not talking about it not working as far as winning games. We're talking about when you get deep into the playoffs, you need multiple players that are capable of creating their shot on a regular basis. The heliocentric thing clearly works, and it works really well to win games. You just have to find a way to optimize everyone when you get deeper and deeper and deeper into the playoffs. But I think you're right. There are ways to give Devin Booker essentially the ball as essentially the point guard, and do some really interesting things with him.
Yep.
The last thing I want to mention, this is not super fun, but I'll just mention his durability is he's been hurt in the last 2 playoffs. He was injured, and this is not his fault. This is not necessarily his fault, but it's brought up with Chris Paul all the time. And I think you have to just mention it with Devin Booker as well. I don't know if there's something he can do to help his hamstrings. I'm not a physiotherapist or something.
I don't know. Think maybe there's a magic bullet fix there. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I know that there are things that players do to try and prevent injuries as far as working out different. And here's the thing about Devin Booker. I just think he's already doing those things. So I do think there needs to be a time where he's healthy throughout the entirety of the playoffs for the Suns to have their best chance at a title. And I just felt the need to mention that.
Yeah, but that's why you can...
it happened in the Bucks series. It happened in the Pelicans series. And then he wasn't quite the same. He was just killing the Pelicans before he was injured. He wasn't quite the same afterwards.
That's why you can understand his kind of more conservative approach recently, though. And it's just, talk about internal development as much as we want, but ultimately some of these problems, the solutions have to come externally, probably. And that's why, I think Book can increase his drives per game this year, and I think he can give you a little bit more, but I don't think you could solve the problem just via internal development there. Unless Ayton takes a pretty unprecedented leap that I'm not expecting, but more on that next week.
Yeah. Booker, I will say, averaged more drives per game in the playoffs. If you're talking about just the ability to actually conserve himself for the playoffs, maybe there was some of that because he was, like I said, just averaging more drives per game in the playoffs as it went along. So that's just something to think about. That's most of what I have. I think we're already getting pretty long in this episode. I could talk about Devin Booker for a long time. But that's most of what I have. Do you have anything else that you want to add just on that question, and we could move on to wrapping up?
No, but I think that reflects just how far he's come in the past year that we talked about last year, that we wanted improved shooting, we got it. We wanted improved defense, we got it. We wanted improved ball handling, we got it. So a lot of the things that we're talking about this year is just how can you get the purest, best form of Devin Booker and kind of put all the best elements together at the same time. And that's difficult, and it's about lineup optimization and whatever. But I don't know, dude. Is there any element of Booker's game really remaining that he's not pretty damn good at? I don't know that there is one.
No.
One other thing that I wanted to give him credit for, he continued to kill it in a season where this is a team thing technically, but the Suns played fast again last year. I feel like we don't talk about this enough.
We did during the season, but yeah.
But then I feel like we forgot for a while, even during the playoffs. During the playoffs, they didn't play as fast as they should have, but that kind of happens in the playoffs. They went down to 26th in pace in Chris Paul's first season, and then back up to 9th last year. And for Booker specifically, we saw both his isolation, his, slow half-court whatever, his isolation efficiency increased last season. His transition efficiency also increased last season. And I just feel like that's the mark. I know I should be talking about things he's bad at right now because that's what you asked me about.
No, yeah.
But that's just...
Anything else you want to add?
No, it's just the mark of a player who has really fully matured, I think. Once you arrive at a point where you can put a guy in situations, whether it's a fast game or a slow game, and he doesn't get rushed. He approaches the game the same way every time, and you trust his decision-making process no matter what the pace is, whether it's in half-court or transition. Booker has arrived at that point. Even if he's not the best in the league necessarily at isolation scoring or whatever, he's pretty damn good at all of that stuff. And yeah, just another shout-out. I really don't have anything else on my list.
On pace, this is irrelevant to what we're talking about, but I honestly hope they go even faster next year if Cameron Johnson's in the starting lineup, just because of the threat that a combination of Devin Booker, Cameron Johnson, and DeAndre Ayton running in transition. What do you do? Pick your poison there.
100%.
It's either Cam Johnson 3 or Devin Booker or DeAndre Ayton at the rim, and that's just absurdly good.
Speaking of the whole transition thing, I guess just real quick, I know we've mentioned in the past with Booker, emotional fouls, getting a little bit too into the heat of the moment and then committing dumb fouls. I think continues to be a bit of an issue with him, but mostly he needs to watch it this year as much as everyone else needs to watch it, because remember, there is the new rule that the NBA is implementing that you can no longer do those intentional take fouls.
No take fouls.
That prevent...
Chris Paul probably had close to the most of those.
Yeah,
right?
But I do think Booker has done it too, and remember...
It's actually why Jared Dudley retired. He saw that rule change coming.
I don't think so. I think there are a lot of reasons Dudley was out of the league. Man couldn't defend anyone by then.
I can jump higher than him now, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you cannot... just for anyone who doesn't know, if you do those intentional take fouls this season that are obviously preventing a transition layup or dunk or whatever, it'll be an automatic free throw for the team on offense. So they're trying to encourage as many potential highlight plays as possible, which I'm totally for. I totally understand. But I do think there are some players on the Suns with their transition defense, they need to clean that up. I think it's only as much of an issue for the Suns as it is for everyone else, though, to be honest. I think everyone does it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Mikal Bridges can improve. Cameron Johnson can improve. DeAndre can improve. Those guys can improve 30%, like a large amount. And none of it, I think, will have an impact as large as Devin Booker improving 10%. The amount of difference that a player at Devin Booker's level can add to a team just with small little improvements at the level he's already at is larger than anything else that can happen. And that's just the way the NBA works. These star players have the largest impact, and Devin Booker is up there with the best. And I think when it comes to confidence that he's going to improve, I'd be shocked if he didn't. He seems to work really hard every offseason and come back with something new every single season. And I think that this season, as far as like the chances of Devin Booker to win MVP, I'm not saying he will. But this season, next season, like these are the seasons where he has the best chance to do it. We're in that range at this point.
What would it take narrative-wise, though, this year, right? Because there is a thing that we're not acknowledging here, which is that people don't trust the Suns anymore. And I think
if we're being real, it'd be like a Chris Paul injury.
I think that works. I think that works against him. Like, I think the Suns would need to win 60 games with Chris Paul missing significant time and with Booker taking the reins and averaging like 30 points and 8
30
assists.
Points, or Chris Paul just was bad.
Like if they could,
Chris Paul was bad.
If they could do that, he has a chance. But otherwise, it seems kind of far fetched. Still, he could get MVP voting, but it would take a lot. It would take a lot to beat out
to win. Yeah, 60 games, 30 points a game. How could you not give it to a guy that does that unless somebody else did?
The advance, you got to give it to Mr. BPM Raptor Boy or whatever.
Rebounds, yeah. If you're 7 feet tall and you get a lot of rebounds, it's really impressive, I think. It's really impressive. All right. Devin Booker, internal development. I don't think there's a player I'm more excited to watch next season than Devin Booker. And to be honest, that's just the case every year. I think that's just what it is. This is already extremely long, but I think a very fun conversation. I'm just grateful that we can do this, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Just have this deep of a conversation about Devin Booker. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add before we leave this one?
Well, we were just joking the other day about how we always forget to do the plugs. And so I think it's only fitting that we insert our plug for our Discord and our Patreon. An hour and a half into this episode. So first of all, if you made it to the end of this, thank you very much, you guys.
Then you're probably already a patron.
You are probably already a patron, but if you are not, a reminder that you are goated. Another reminder that everyone who is in our Discord currently, who subscribes to our Patreon at the lowest, $3 a month tier.
At least $3, yeah.
Yeah, it's, and everyone above them too, but just if you're in that lowest tier, you're eligible to join our Discord. The people in our Discord are the most attractive people on the planet. I just want to say that again. And there are currently 250 of them, which is really exciting. We have a real community in there now, always talking about Suns basketball or whatever else. So if you're thinking about if you're just kind of getting back into Suns basketball now in the season now and you want to join the conversation, it's a good time to do it. And shout out to all the people on Patreon. We'll be back for them with a Patreon episode later this week as well.
And I also, if we're doing plugs, I have a TikTok now. If you guys want to follow me on TikTok, feel free to find me there. Protected Pick, same thing. I'm actually pretty excited to do that. I'm sort of learning there how to edit videos on there, and I actually think it's a pretty cool platform that maybe can be taken advantage of a little bit better for basketball content. It makes it very easy to edit videos. Follow me there.
I am afraid of teenagers, so I've avoided that. But we'll see. Maybe in the future.
All right. Appreciate you guys for listening. This has been an incredibly fun episode, and this series, of course, has been very fun. Back with a Patreon episode about Media Day, and back next week with our final internal development episode about DeAndre Ayton. Thanks, guys.